I've seen it. And you mentioned one point there. We're getting ready to wrap up here, but you mentioned at the top of the call of the show an important point. You said that you've been married for 13 years,
Yeah.
and that your parents are also both married. I was married for a very long time, and my parents were also both. They're still married. They're 80 and 81, turning 82. So they've been married since 1965. You can do the math. So my whole frame of reference on what a household looked like in terms of mother and father, okay, it wasn't Beaver Cleaver. My parents are like your parents are from the Caribbean. We have a different dynamic in our household, but the bottom line is they're both there. They're both still there, and I'm a grown man. So my view of a relationship is very different than what relationships look like today in 2017. We can talk about the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, maybe even the 80s. That was ages ago. Relationships today don't look anything like the relationships did back in those days. I got married in the early 90s, and now I'm single in 2017. It is a completely different environment. It's a different dynamic, and I'm not saying that marriage isn't right for anyone. It's right for people who I think have, they know who they are. They have dealt with their issues. We all have baggage. Everybody has baggage. The difference is some people acknowledge their baggage and work with it and learn from it. And some people continuously deny it and they walk on water. And those are the less mature ones who keep dating the same people over and over again with different names and different faces, but still the same person, because the same person, them, keeps showing up to that relationship. So nothing ever progresses beyond that point. So it's there's a lot of reflection when you get later in life. For younger people, it's a bit different, but when you're later in life, you got to do a lot of reflection and be willing to admit that, you know what, I suck at this. I could do better at this. I'm really good at this. And this is what I'm willing to compromise on, but this is what I'm not willing to compromise on. These are my values. If they don't align, we don't need to be together.
Absolutely, you're right. Marriage is not for everyone. I think about, and speaking from pastoral perspective, that when Jesus walked the earth, people looked at him and said, "Why aren't you married?" And he made that statement: "It's not meant for everything, meant for everyone, especially if you know what God is calling you to do." And I think that's a piece that people should reflect on in terms of what is God calling you to do, and if He's calling you to do this task with someone in your life, with someone, a life partner, then understand that calling and move toward it and find someone that you can work with. But sometimes it may not be that piece, and sometimes singleness can be very fulfilling in terms of the context of knowing what God wants in your life, because obviously Jesus was a single person and found great fulfillment in doing the will of God for his life. So I think what I learned as a Protestant, we can learn something from Catholic Christians in that regard, which for some reason they have found a way to celebrate being single, which I think a lot of us being brought up in a Protestant sort of mindset, we feel enslaved or trapped that we must be in a co-ed relationship or intimate relationship that may not necessarily be beneficial for both parties, right?
Well, but I'm playing both sides of the fence here, but the reality of it is we are a pair bonding species, right? Mm-hmm. There are some people who have a calling like Nikola Tesla, who invented pretty much everything you see around you, right?
Yeah.
The guy was a lifelong bachelor, died penniless and insane because everyone stole his ideas, but you wouldn't have this if it wasn't for him, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, we're a pair bonding species, and up until maybe the 60s, 70s, you weren't considered a quote-unquote real man unless you were married and with kids. In fact, you weren't considered an adult, which is why when you watch his old World War II clips and these guys they're doing whatever they can to go out there and fight, because they realize that if they stay behind, number one, they don't get any respect as a man who didn't fight for the country. Mm-hmm. The women wouldn't want to marry him. He wouldn't have any kids. He'd be a child forever. That was the real issue behind them wanting to go out and fight, not because they wanted to shoot people, but they didn't want to become a child forevermore, at least in the eyes of society.
that was a rite of passage for many of those people. Uh, my hope that when we talk about this subject is there is a sense of understanding who you are. Uh, I always said this to people that to me, there's no such thing as soulmates. And do you think there are people in your life that you find that you can walk a journey of life with? Uh, the only thing that God says to you is that once you say yes, I'm going to walk with you forever, then generally speaking, it's forever. And we know there are extenuating circumstances, but generally we got to be true to our word, and you have to be, her has to be true to her word. I just really hope that there's really an appreciation of value that our words matter, relationship matters. We are meant to bond with each other, whether we are married or not. We're meant to be in community. We're meant to be with people in some type of social dynamic. Our depressions are probably linked to not being able to plug into people who care about us. It's just that extra step that marriage brings, that God says that you know what, I want to be involved in sharing my life through this relationship. And I always said that to people who are non-Christians as well, because it's a gift that it puts things in perspective of why are we together? Well, there's got to be something higher than this, than just having sex and making money, right? There's got to be something that's fulfilling for the two of us. And I think marriages or relationships that think that third level may put a little more a compulsion for someone to say, you know what, maybe give this relationship a little try, because there's something higher than just the two of us being together, right?
So you're touching on something I think that we should do a separate show on, and that is religion, and Christianity in particular, and the Black community. Because I know that there is a very tenuous relationship between the two, and the undertone of this entire conversation, at least from the perspective that you were presenting, has led back to a common value system, in this case, Christianity. And there are many in our community who see Christianity as the white man's religion, or the religion of the slave master.
That's
and
right.
So when you dismiss a value system, Christianity or any other one, what sits in its place? What's the bond that holds a relationship and a family together if you don't have a value system? Now, it can be one that you've made up along the way, or read through a couple of books, and you kind of cobble together a few things. But the reality of it is, I'm not Bible thumping here. The bottom line is this: the Bible, where I go to church, it's not seen as a holy, magical doc. It's a series of documents put together into a book. Some of them were letters that were written by certain people to an audience, and they kind of compiled them into a book. Now, they're telling you stories about how certain situations happen, how they dealt with the situations, and a lot of these situations are identical to what we go through today on a personal level. But these are 2,000-year-old documents. Some cases, these documents go back 5,000 years. Mm-hmm. What we're going through today, I mean, we have technology and all this fancy stuff around us, but the human condition is the same as it was 5,000 years ago. We still have love, hate, fight, children, sadness, anger. That's been around since the beginning of human time. These letters that were written by people who've lived through these things and given advice, and who've then passed that advice on, it's like we've solved how to get around these things. And having a common value system, whatever you want to call it, is important to be able to navigate those parts of life that are just going to happen. There's going to be happiness. There's going to be sadness. There's going to be birth and death. And these things are going to happen throughout the rest of human history, right? If you don't have a common value system, an alignment of values, it doesn't matter how good your intentions are. It's going to be almost impossible to keep a meaningful relationship together unless you have a common set of values. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you have to have something that transcends the two of you. And interesting enough, in the Hebrew of male and female, when Adam and Eve were brought together, it's interesting that the grammar, when you study the ancient language, once you move God out of the picture based on the ancient grammar, you get fire, they said. And so the scholars, the Jewish scholars, said the fire was actually meant to be judgment. Once a couple removes God out of their life, you bring judgment in your life. And judgment not in the sense of hell, but judgment in the sense that you have challenges in your marriages that will lead to eventually a dissolving of the marriage. And so when couples forget about God, and let's just take away the whole idea of Christian theology, but the sense of there is someone that has brought you together. You may not know who, but there is a sense, or yes, that you feel will hold you accountable. Once you've kind of removed that piece, yeah, I mean, it's good intention, right? To try to see if we stay together. And once the feeling wears off, and especially with men, I find once they feel that romantic love has worn off, and C.S. Lewis said it best, men don't recognize that love starts off like a starter and then turns into engine idle. They want the high of a starter all the time. But if your car is always on starting mode, guess what? The car is not going to work. It's not meant to be on starter. It's meant to get the car going and then move into an idle. We want that high all the time. And that's many times when it goes into idle, we're not mature enough to say, I am now transitioning to a new phase of love that doesn't require that emotional jolt. A person that will walk by you, and you're like, wow, and you start to engage with that person, and you feel like, wow, this person's for me because I feel the things that I had for LaTanya, that I had for LaQuisha. Guess what? I guess I'm in love and I don't love LaQuisha. Not recognizing that you're in a smoother, tranquil part of the relationship where you'll have those times where you have the romantic feeling, but not as often as you has the start. And C.S. Lewis put it well in this Mere Christianity book, and I always point back to it because it helps bring focus for me when I feel like, oh, where's those feelings? No, I'm in a phase of my relationship that is a quieter and steadier love, and that's the way it should be, not so much of always the high. But a lot of men don't know that, and guess what? They feel like they need to walk out of the relationship to get that high again, and it's never satisfied, right?
Well, I'm going to throw a little wrench in that analogy. So here's the wrench I'm throwing in. Men's sexual peak is in their early 20s, and as time goes on, their sexual peak decreases. So that starter you're talking about,
yes, right,
becomes less and less of a wow, I need to have that in my life. I mean, look, every guy, no matter how old you are, sees a beautiful woman, they look, right?
That's right.
Guys who have the fighting urge to act, are at their sexual peak. By your 30s, 40s, 50s, she's beautiful, she's nice to look at, but it's you don't, that urge to chase after and get her phone number, dude, I'm past all that. But the dichotomy that makes it interesting, you're talking about this earlier with the Adam and Eve story, where there's the constant tension, is women's sexual peak is in their 30s and 40s. So when ours is going down, theirs is going up. So that need for the starter early on, not necessarily there. By the time you hit 30 and 40, that I want some guide of that's why that book, The 50 Shades of Grey, 20-year-olds weren't buying that book. It was called mommy porn.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. And I think to your point, that age between 20 to 35, 40. After that, we start to decrease in terms of that drive. But during that drive, that's where men are most confused, right? Because they can't distinguish that they still want that high. Yep. And so just letting men know that, guess what? You're with this person, you're going to be on a high, but guess what? It's going to taper off. And so when you see someone again that gets you going again, don't think that's an invitation for you to start to step on that marriage. Stay true to your vows, stay true to your commitment, recognize that this is who God has brought you together to do something very special. Keep that sort of bigger picture in mind, the vision as a leader in the family or co-leader of the family, however you want to look at it, that this is the two things, these are the things that you need to do and remember to keep the glue in place. Otherwise, you're just going to rip out of the seam. Again, this is not with human beings. These things aren't formulas. There's always exceptions to the rules. I get that. But I think there is, on average, if we continue to think in that sort of mode and take marriage seriously, not as a sense of being trapped or being enslaved, but seeing that I need a partner in life to fulfill the things that I know God has placed in my life, or whatever higher purpose I feel like I need to accomplish. I need you, and I feel like I can do the same for you as well. And guess what? We're more likely to track in that direction.
That's a much higher level of emotional maturity. Denley, anything else that you want to say before we wrap up here?
I think I pretty much said everything. Just my encouragement to anyone that I don't think marriage is not magical. It is hard work, because I always say I have the saying that comes to me that the closer we are with each other, the more likely we'll step on each other's toes. And if you think about dance, the closer you are in terms of your partner, you will step on each other's toes. The question is, when you say ouch, don't get offended. Find a way to adjust your footsteps and keep dancing.
There's one thing you said that I want to repeat that I thought was really good, and that was about the dynamic, the communication between the husband and the wife, and that is, it's not about who's right, it's about what's right.
That's
if I had
right.
to condense all this down into a single statement, I would say that's a statement I think that got my attention the most. That's important in a relationship. It's not about who's right, it's about what's right.
That's right. I remember hearing that from Zig Ziglar, and that always stuck with me. The late Zig Ziglar, motivational speaker, and it's so true. It is very true. It's once you say what is right, it's more objective. When you say it's who's right, it's about me. Move it to the what, and then I think it really allows us to be more sober-minded in what's going on.
Exactly.
Enjoyed the show? Like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for joining us in The Man Cave.